If you're over 60, here's something most people never hear. Some of the nuts you eat in the evening can quietly destroy your sleep and leave behind a chain of problems that build night after night. After 60, melatonin can drop by up to 80 to 90%. The nervous system becomes more reactive, the digestive tract slows, and cortisol becomes easier to trigger. In this state, your body can't afford the wrong signals, yet several popular nuts send exactly the wrong ones. A handful after dinner may seem harmless, but certain nuts can spike cortisol just before bed, trigger a glucose crash at 2 to 3 a.m., irritate the bladder, cause reflux the moment you lie down, or even block your natural melatonin production, and the consequences go far beyond one bad night. Repeated interruptions in the early morning hours chip away at deep sleep, weaken memory consolidation, reduce morning stability, and increase inflammation. Many older adults experience these problems for years without ever realizing that a small bowl of healthy nuts was the trigger. I'm Dr. Jonathan Reed, a physician specializing in sleep and neurophysiology in older adults for more than 25 years. I've seen patients try teas, magnesium, and sleep medications only to keep waking in the same pattern until we remove the nuts that were overactivating their nighttime chemistry. Tonight, I'll show you the 4 worst nuts for sleep after 60, the ones most likely to disrupt your hormones, digestion, and nervous system, and the 4 best that can support melatonin, calm nighttime energy, and help your sleep hold together again. Let's start with the 4th worst nut, a surprisingly common one you may be eating every single week. Number 4, pine nuts. Pine nuts look harmless, small, soft, and often considered clean eating. But for adults over 60, they're one of the most sleep-disrupting nuts you can eat after dinner. The biggest issue is digestive irritation. Pine nuts are naturally high in oils that slow gastric emptying, and for an aging digestive system, that delay matters. When food sits too long in the stomach, pressure rises the moment you lie down. That pressure can trigger mild nighttime reflux, not enough to burn, but enough to activate the vagus nerve and push you out of early night sleep. Many seniors think they just woke up, but physiologically, reflux was the signal. The second problem is omega-6 density. Pine nuts carry one of the highest omega-6 levels among common nuts, far higher than almonds or walnuts. In younger adults, the body compensates, but after 60, elevated omega-6 can increase nighttime inflammatory signaling, which reduces the stability of deep sleep. Studies on older adults show that elevated inflammatory markers correlate with more frequent micro-awakenings, the kind of light, fragile sleep that never feels restorative. Then there's something often called pine mouth. Not everyone experiences it, but a small percentage of people get a metallic, bitter taste hours after eating pine nuts. At night, that sensory irritation keeps the nervous system slightly more alert than it should be. A bitter aftertaste may seem trivial, but during the first half of the night, when melatonin is already low, even subtle sensory noise can interrupt sleep consolidation. The solution isn't complicated. If you're over 60, avoid pine nuts after 3 p.m. Use them at lunch if you enjoy them, but not at dinner and never as a bedtime snack. Because once evening arrives, pine nuts stop being harmless and start becoming a predictable disruptor of the sleep you're trying to protect. Number 3, peanuts. Peanuts are one of the most common evening snacks. Easy to grab, inexpensive, salty, familiar. But for adults over 60, they create a perfect storm of biological triggers that can break sleep in multiple ways. The first and most serious issue is aflatoxin load. Peanuts are legumes, not true nuts, and they're far more vulnerable to mold-derived aflatoxins. In older adults, even low amounts can place additional stress on the liver. And here's the part most people don't realize. When the liver is under stress at night, it signals the adrenal system to compensate, leading to a cortisol rise between 2 and 3 a.m. That rise doesn't feel like stress. It feels like suddenly turning on in the middle of the night with no clear reason. Peanuts are also extremely omega-6 dense, higher than cashews, almonds, or walnuts. After 60, the body becomes less efficient at buffering inflammatory pathways. High omega-6 foods eaten late in the day can increase nighttime inflammation, which interferes with the continuity of deep sleep. Many older adults who report light, thin sleep are actually reacting to silent inflammatory signaling, not aging itself. Digestion is another problem. Peanuts digest slowly and ferment more readily than tree nuts, which produces mild gas and abdominal pressure. When you lie down, that pressure stimulates the vagus nerve, the same nerve involved in nighttime awakenings. A retired bus driver I treated, Evelyn, kept waking every night around 2:30 a.m. She assumed it was age. Once she stopped eating peanuts after dinner, the awakenings dropped within a week. There's also the matter of bladder irritation. Salted peanuts, the form most people eat, increased nighttime thirst, increasing nighttime urine production, and increasing the chance of a false bathroom wake-up. Many seniors think they woke because they needed to go, but biologically they needed to go because they had already woken. For older adults, peanuts are a triple hit: digestive irritation, inflammatory load, and cortisol rebound. If you enjoy them, have them earlier in the day, never after 3 p.m., and absolutely not as an evening snack. Because once the sun goes down, peanuts shift from being a comfort food to being a predictable disruptor of sleep stability. Number 2, cashews. Cashews feel gentle, soft texture, mild flavor, easy to digest, or at least that's what most people assume. But for adults over 60, cashews create 3 specific biochemical problems that make them one of the worst evening snacks for sleep. The first problem is oxalates. Cashews are unusually high in oxalates compared to other nuts. In younger adults, the kidneys and bladder handle this without much disturbance. But as bladder sensitivity increases with age, oxalates can irritate the bladder lining, creating the sensation of needing to wake or shift position, even when the bladder isn't full. Most seniors describe it as a vague discomfort, not pain, but it's enough to pull you out of early night sleep. This is why cashews are strongly linked to nocturia-like awakenings in older adults. The second issue is carbohydrate load. Cashews have significantly more carbs than almonds, walnuts, pistachios, or peanuts. Eaten after dinner, that carb content produces a gentle glucose rise, followed by a glucose drop a few hours later. And in an older adult, a nighttime glucose dip triggers a cortisol spike as the body attempts to stabilize blood sugar. That cortisol spike often hits around 2 to 3 a.m., the exact window many seniors wake up without knowing why. Cashews also contribute to low-grade inflammation, a mechanism often overlooked. They contain notable amounts of omega-6 fatty acids, and when eaten close to bedtime, this can intensify inflammatory signaling. Inflammation doesn't wake you with pain. It wakes you by disrupting serotonin and melatonin pathways. A former caregiver I worked with, Leonard, described it perfectly. "I didn't feel bad. I just couldn't stay asleep." Removing cashews from his evening routine cut his awakenings in half within 10 days. The combination of bladder irritability, glucose volatility, and inflammatory load makes cashews a top-tier sleep disruptor for older adults. If you love them, move them to breakfast or lunch, but never after 3 p.m. At night, cashews don't behave like a gentle snack. They behave like a biochemical trigger that destabilizes the exact systems older adults depend on to keep sleep intact. Number 1, Brazil nuts. Brazil nuts are often marketed as superfoods, rich in selenium, great for immunity, great for thyroid function. That may be true in moderation, but for adults over 60, especially when eaten in the evening, Brazil nuts are one of the most disruptive foods you can put into your nighttime routine. The reason is selenium concentration. Brazil nuts don't just contain selenium. They contain enormous, unpredictable amounts. A single nut can provide anywhere from 50% to 300% of the daily recommended intake. And while selenium is essential during the day, at night it has a very different effect. It raises alertness, increases metabolic activity, and interferes with the natural drop in core temperature required for deep sleep. In older adults who already struggle with melatonin decline, this is enough to break the architecture of the first half of the night. The second issue is thyroid stimulation. Selenium supports thyroid hormone activation, again, useful in the morning, but in the evening, it can nudge the thyroid toward increased activity, raising heart rate and nighttime arousal. Many older adults tell me, I woke up because my heart felt busy without realizing the trigger came from a handful of Brazil nuts eaten after dinner. Brazil nuts also deliver a neurological overstimulation effect when eaten late in the day. The combination of selenium spikes, methylated compounds, and high fat density keeps the nervous system more active than it should be as melatonin tries to rise. One example came from Marjorie, a 73-year-old who added 3 Brazil nuts to her nightly routine because she'd heard they were great for aging. Within a week, she was waking twice nightly with no explanation. Removing the nuts restored her sleep within days. And there's a longer-term concern: repeated nighttime alertness, especially triggered by metabolic stimulation, accelerates the decline of deep sleep in older adults. Deep sleep isn't just rest, it's immune repair, memory consolidation, and cardiovascular regulation. Brazil nuts disrupt that window more than any other nut. For seniors, Brazil nuts belong firmly in daylight hours. Never after 3 p.m., and certainly never as a bedtime snack. At night, they're not a superfood. They're the strongest sleep disruptor on this entire list. You've just seen the 4 nuts most likely to disrupt sleep after 60 through cortisol spikes, glucose crashes, bladder irritation, inflammation, and nighttime overstimulation. But here's the encouraging part. The same biology that makes certain nuts harmful also makes other nuts unusually effective at supporting deep, continuous sleep. When you remove the wrong triggers and introduce the right signals, the night begins to stabilize. Melatonin rises more smoothly, blood sugar holds steady, and the nervous system doesn't jump awake at the slightest pressure. So now let's shift from what breaks sleep to what helps restore it. Starting with number 4, a nut that quietly protects neurons and reduces sleep fragmentation in older adults. Number 4, hazelnuts. Hazelnuts rarely get attention in conversations about sleep, but for older adults, they offer a combination that directly supports the stability of the night, especially the first half, where sleep often breaks down after 60. One of the biggest benefits comes from vitamin E, a nutrient many seniors don't get enough of. Vitamin E helps protect neuron membranes from oxidative firing, the background noise in the brain that becomes more pronounced with age. When evening oxidative activity is high, the cortex doesn't settle properly, and sleep onset becomes light, easily interrupted. Hazelnuts provide a gentle evening dose that helps reduce this neurological static. They also contain small amounts of tryptophan, enough to support serotonin without causing the glucose swings that come from higher carb snacks. For older adults, maintaining serotonin stability early in the night is critical. It sets the stage for smoother melatonin release later, which improves both sleep onset and the continuity of the first sleep cycle. The healthy fats in hazelnuts play a separate, equally important role. They provide slow, steady fuel for the liver, preventing the early night glucose dip that can trigger a premature cortisol rise. When cortisol rises too soon, the nervous system catches the signal and pulls the brain toward wakefulness. Hazelnuts help keep that from happening. A woman in her late 60s, Donna, struggled with sleep fragmentation for years. Moving a small handful of hazelnuts to the early evening, instead of higher inflammatory nuts she was eating before bed, gave her longer stretches of uninterrupted sleep within 10 days. Timing matters. 5 to 8 hazelnuts in the early evening, ideally 1 hour after dinner, is enough to support nighttime neural stability without overwhelming digestion. For older adults who want calmer evenings, fewer disruptions, and a more resilient first sleep cycle, hazelnuts are a surprisingly effective starting point. Number 3, pumpkin seeds. Pumpkin seeds are one of the most reliable sleep-supporting foods for older adults. Not because they're healthy, but because they deliver 2 nutrients that directly influence the chemistry of deep sleep: magnesium and zinc. As people age, nighttime magnesium levels often fall. Magnesium is the mineral that keeps neurons from firing too easily. Without enough of it, the nervous system stays slightly overactive, especially in the evening, when it should be downshifting. Pumpkin seeds are naturally rich in bioavailable magnesium, which helps strengthen GABA activity, the inhibitory signal the brain uses to quiet muscles, reduce twitching, and initiate deeper phases of sleep. Zinc adds another layer of support. Melatonin production depends on adequate zinc, And for adults over 60, whose melatonin levels may already be 50 to 80% lower than in midlife, this mineral matters. Zinc helps convert serotonin into melatonin smoothly, preventing the flat melatonin curve that leads to light, easily broken sleep. Pumpkin seeds also contain tryptophan, giving the body the raw material it needs for serotonin. Together, tryptophan, magnesium, zinc, they form a trio few evening foods can match. These nutrients work with the body's natural timing rather than forcing anything, which is why pumpkin seeds create a more sustained improvement rather than a quick, inconsistent effect. One man I worked with, Gerald, had leg tension and nighttime restlessness that disrupted his first sleep cycle almost every night. Introducing a tablespoon of pumpkin seeds in the early evening significantly reduced the muscle firing that kept pulling him awake. And within 2 weeks, his first 3 hours of sleep became noticeably deeper. Timing is simple: 1 to 2 tablespoons, unsalted, eaten 60 to 90 minutes after dinner. For older adults seeking deeper sleep, calmer muscles, and a smoother transition into the first half of the night, pumpkin seeds are one of the most predictable tools available. Number 2, almonds. Almonds are one of the most dependable evening snacks for older adults because they support two systems that often fail after 60: nighttime glucose stability and neuromuscular relaxation. The first benefit comes from their healthy monounsaturated fats, which slow digestion just enough to provide a steady release of fuel through the night. Many adults over 60 experience a drop in glucose around 2 to 3 a.m., and when glucose dips, cortisol rises. That cortisol spike is one of the most common biological triggers for sudden early morning awakenings. A small serving of almonds helps smooth that curve, preventing the fuel crash that snaps the brain awake. Almonds are also naturally rich in magnesium, a mineral older adults frequently lack. Magnesium supports the parasympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for lowering heart rate, relaxing muscles, and preparing the body for deep sleep. Without enough magnesium, the nervous system stays slightly switched on, making it harder to maintain continuous sleep, even if you fall asleep easily. There's another advantage. Almonds can improve heart rate variability, HRV, a measure of how well the nervous system shifts between activation and rest. Higher HRV is strongly associated with more stable sleep architecture in older adults. Almonds offer a gentle way to nudge HRV upward, especially when eaten consistently in the early evening. A retired teacher named Walter struggled with nights that felt shallow and easily broken, not from anxiety, but from subtle internal arousal. When he replaced his salted peanuts with a small handful of almonds around 7 p.m., the change was noticeable within a week. Steadier heart rate, fewer wake-ups, and a more grounded feel to his entire night. The key is moderation and timing. 5 to 7 almonds, unsalted, ideally 60 to 90 minutes after dinner. For seniors who need stable fuel, calmer nerves, and a stronger foundation for deep sleep, almonds consistently deliver more than their simplicity suggests. Number 1. Walnuts. Walnuts top this list for a simple reason. No other nut supports as many layers of sleep biology at once. For older adults, especially those who struggle with light sleep, early morning waking, or difficulty staying asleep, walnuts offer a combination that is unusually effective. First, walnuts contain natural melatonin, not a supplement, not a spike, but a small, steady dose that mirrors the body's own rhythm. After 60, melatonin production may fall by more than half, which is why the first half of the night becomes fragile. Walnuts help fill that gap gently, supporting both sleep onset and the continuity of the early night sleep cycle. Second, walnuts provide ALA, omega-3 fatty acids, which reduce neuroinflammation, a major factor in the thinning of deep sleep with age. When inflammatory signals rise at night, the brain spends more time in light sleep and less in slow-wave sleep. Walnuts help shift that balance back toward deeper, more restorative stages. They also offer tryptophan, the amino acid used to make serotonin. Serotonin is the precursor to melatonin, and stabilizing it early in the night helps the body maintain melatonin later, especially during the 2 to 4 a.m. window when many older adults experience abrupt awakenings. One memorable case came from Eleanor, a 76-year-old who felt her nights had become paper thin. She wasn't anxious. She wasn't in pain. Her sleep simply wouldn't hold. Adding a small serving of walnuts an hour before bed and removing high-inflammatory nuts from her evening routine gave her deeper, quieter nights within 2 weeks. Timing is straightforward. 5 to 7 walnut halves, unsalted, 60 minutes before bed. More is not better. The goal isn't volume, it's signaling. For older adults needing stronger melatonin support, less inflammation, and a sleep architecture that stays intact, walnuts are one of the most powerful natural tools available. Again, I have to mention that for older adults, timing is as important as the nuts themselves. Your digestion slows with age, your glucose curve becomes more fragile, and melatonin drops sharply after sunset. So each nut must line up with the system it supports. Here's the simplest routine that works for most of my patients. Late afternoon, 4 to 6 p.m., 1 tablespoon of pumpkin seeds. This is your magnesium and zinc window, the minerals that calm muscle firing, support GABA, and prepare the nervous system for the evening slowdown. Early evening, 6:30 to 7:30 p.m., 5 to 7 almonds, unsalted. Their slow-burning fats help stabilize nighttime glucose and prevent the 2 to 3 a.m. cortisol spike that breaks sleep for so many adults over 60. 1 hour before bed, 5 to 7 walnut halves. This is your natural melatonin support, slow, steady, and aligned with your internal rhythm. Walnuts also reduce neural inflammation, strengthening the first deep sleep cycle. Optional, 5 to 8 hazelnuts placed between afternoon and early evening if you struggle with light sleep or early night fragmentation. 2 rules. Don't eat nuts within 30 minutes of lying down. Avoid pine nuts, peanuts, cashews, and Brazil nuts after 3 p.m. Their effects on cortisol, glucose, bladder signaling, and nighttime alertness often undo the progress you're trying to build. This routine is small, but biology responds to timing more than volume. Sleep after 60 doesn't collapse all at once. It weakens in patterns. Melatonin drops, glucose wavers, inflammation rises, and the nervous system becomes easier to trigger. But those same patterns can be rebuilt when you remove the wrong nighttime signals and replace them with the right ones. 4 nuts break sleep. 4 nuts restore it. The difference is not luck. It's chemistry, timing, and consistency. Give your body 7 nights with the right routine, and you may feel the shift. Fewer 2 to 3 a.m. awakenings, deeper first cycles, and mornings that feel clearer again. If this helped, like the video, share it, and tell me in the comments. Which nut are you switching to tonight? Your nights can change, and it starts with one small choice this evening.